So I would say Scumdogs is really the record that brought GWAR notoriety and acclaim, and I think even to a lot of fans who weren't aware of the first album, it was the debut as far as they were concerned. That was the record that people really started paying attention to. Clearly there were lessons learned making that first album. So what changed by the time you were able to do this one?
Well, I mean, for one thing, we weren't working with a hopeless New York arty hippie with a compulsion to sue everybody he knows. So this was this was different. Instead, we were working with a fading punk rock LA hippie who with a compulsion to sue everybody he knows. So it was a blast. I mean, Scumdogs, you're right. We were when we first did the record, it came out on Master Records, which was a British label that was owned by Buster Bloodvessel from the band Bad Manners.
Oh wow! And I never knew that connection. Like the ska band.
Yeah, that's right. And Buster was, I mean, that was cool going over to London. And what I remember best about that trip was Buster was like, I mean, of course, he was incredibly well connected with this world that I just loved. I mean,
yeah.
But I didn't really know very much about it. But yeah, I mean, he's buddies with all the dudes from the Clash, and had he took me to a disco. We went to a disco, and as you know, in Europe, discos actually play different music besides just whatever house and dance. They play rock. This one was a mostly it was a guy spinning records, and he had just crates and crates of singles, 45s, right? And they were all ska and reggae 45s. And so I talked to this guy because he was back there. I was smoking weed with him. And he was just a Rasta guy, and he was incredibly friendly. And then he told me some really interesting stuff about this music. I was a very young guy, like 19, I guess. And then we leave, and he's like, "So did you like Don?" And I'm like, "Don?" This was Don Letts that I had been hanging out with, from Big Audio Dynamite, and I had no idea.
I just watched not that long ago BBC's documentary about skinhead culture, and it was hosted by him.
Yeah,
he was the guy doing all the interviews.
Oh man, a smart guy, and he had no reason to be super nice to me, but he was. I mean, he was just a great person, and really so knowledgeable. And that man, the music he was playing, I'll never forget it. It was so great. He knew everything. Talk about a deep dive. I mean, every single song he knew so much about. So it was very cool.
That's incredible. Yeah, he was one of those people who I think was responsible for propagating so much of that style, which of course inevitably influenced so many things that are still around.
Yeah. And in a weird way, I guess it influenced GWAR. I mean, even, certainly Richmond, where GWAR was based at that time, we had a reggae club in that town, which was very cool. And the Rastas were some of the only people that would let us play, so wow. GWAR was playing. Yeah, I mean, so they were helping us out. They helped out all the punk bands at the time. And that's really what GWAR was when we recorded Scumdogs. We were a punk band that was playing heavy metal, ironically.
Yeah, I mean, that show on the prior album at the Howard Johnson's was definitely a punk show.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the bands that played was Raw Meat, I think they were called. They were definitely punk too. It was quite mind expansive to my 14-year-old brain at the time, for sure. And this also, Scumdogs, saw a lot of additions to the lineup. I believe it was also Beefcake the Mighty's first turn at vocals?
Well, yeah, I mean, I had there was some stuff that Beefcake did on the on Hello, but the first time doing a whole song, yeah.
Yeah. And what do you remember about sort of how the things changed really in terms of what you were able to do with the theatricality and the show that you put on, and just as the band became more known, and you know,
I mean, a lot of things changed. The audience changed. The intent in a lot of ways of GWAR changed. I mean, when we were doing, it's very fitting really that Kramer would do the first record, because Kramer, that was an art scene. And that's what GWAR was. And GWAR is a punk rock art project.
Total.
And yeah, and that's I mean, that's where we belonged. And our fans were generally like art students, and did very well with the NYU crowd up in New York. But then, like, by the time we did Scumdogs, I mean, I remember definitely by the time we got to the West Coast touring for that record, it became apparent to us that, oh wow, okay, there's a lot of metal fans here, right? Like this is where we need to put our energy, I mean, and of course the record was already in the bag, and this was a time when the band was there was a lot of major label interest, and we were kind of spurning all of that, and just we were terrified somebody was going to tell us what to do. We wanted to make our statement, and I'm glad that we did it that way. But the band had developed musically and was more focused, and we had some lineup changes. We basically, I tried to put together all of the best players in town. Really, on the first record, it was on Hello. There was a thrash band from Richmond called White Cross, and on that record, really that's what it was. It was White Cross with Oderus singing, and with myself playing bass. And so this moving away from that was important. There was also two members of Death Piggy on that first record, which was Brocky's band before GWAR. So Scumdogs had a very different feel. It was a very, we were listening to lots of Celtic Frost, listening to lots of Metallica and Slayer, and sort of realizing that this is what GWAR was, whereas before we had been sort of mocking heavy metal with these abstractions of Kiss, the Kiss sound. Like, it didn't really sound anything like Kiss, but it's like, just how can we make the stupidest music imaginable, right? And then on Scumdogs, we actually did manage to make the stupidest music imaginable.
But you still had guitars, and you would still eat our cars.
That's right. It's just now that the guitars knew how to play. So
yeah, and I like that idea of absorbing bands whole, almost like the Borg, of there's just picking up other bands from Richmond, and
that's exactly what I mean. That's an important thing that people don't know about GWAR, is that it started that way, right? Like it was the very first time that I saw GWAR as an audience member. All they did was hold the guitars and say over and over again that they were cool. Like there was no actual music in that entire set. And that was at a tiny little club in Richmond. And it was just like feedback, and this guy going, and it wasn't Oderus, by the way. It was a different singer. Yeah, Oderus was holding the guitar. He played guitar the first like 3 times that I saw the band. He played guitar, and
played air quotes.
yeah, he held it. Because everybody knows that Oderus is just a crackerjack guitar player. Um, so yeah, that was funny. And yeah, I mean, so it grew a lot by the time we did Scumdogs.
And you mentioned, major label interest and things like that. And obviously, that time period, we're getting close to, the alt rock explosion. And we've been through cycles of it now, but where it's like, the mainstream is destroying the underground. But I feel like had you taken some of those opportunities and gone that route back then, GWAR could have been a bigger thing for a shorter amount of time versus sitting here still talking about it now because it's still a thing that people love and care about. You know
I
what
agree.
I mean?
Yeah. I do. Yeah, I agree with that. I don't agree with the idea that the mainstream is ruining the underground. I think that the underground ruins the underground, right? Like I never really saw the mainstream. I mean, sure, they're interested in making money, right? But they're not the ones that, really, it always looked to me like at some point there was definitely a change. I mean, you didn't have a hardcore band like Death Piggy or White Cross with the intention of making money, right? Like that wasn't even on the radar. And I don't care if it was Circle Jerks, DRI, you name it. You don't name your band the Butthole Surfers if you want to make money from music, right? Like these are not, and that's very different than punk rock in Great Britain. And, because they were making money from music always. The American hardcore was different. And so for GWAR, that's what we came out of. That's where we started. I can't even remember where I started with this rant. That's part of the problem. Now I'm so old, I can't keep a thought in my brain for longer than 5 seconds.
Centuries old, hundreds of years.
Hundreds of
years. Yeah, and that's, I think there's something to be said too for the idea that oftentimes the mainstream comes to the underground and not necessarily the other way around, that just the din of what's happening becomes so large that it can't be ignored.
It is, but look, that's true, but I really don't like this idea of them absorbing, because I do think that their willingness, right? Like nobody made Nirvana make that record. Nobody made, Soundgarden make, over and over again, that's what's happened. And it's the same thing with punk rock. It sought that. It really did.
People forget the Ramones always wanted to make it.
That's right.
there was no era of the Ramones where they were like, no, please don't give us hit songs and popularity. That was the idea.
Yeah.